recording while you still getting set up, so we get some of this.
You ready?
No, we ain't ready, but we.
You gonna do that chair? What chair you want?
Whatever.
I'm gonna do this chair.
Okay.
How do I boost this up?
That's the one you can boost. Somebody broke that one.
Don't worry about it, man. Authentic.
Go ahead. Take this. Go ahead.
But y'all gonna be facing each other?
Yeah.
Y'all just talking like this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good aim.
Nothing wrong with my fit, man.
5 minutes later.
You still thinking about it? You know what I'm saying? I got him on one.
You got it in the bed.
I got it. Look, you dropping the key. Look at it.
Hey, do a favor. Take that bottle. You don't even wear no
Yeah, I got about $2.
Y'all do switch
I gave my daughter one.
Switch chairs though. If you wanna.
Listen, I got a
You
Concord,
wanna be on that
white
side
gold.
or something?
It don't matter.
It's nasty, but I'm in love with it. But I don't wear it. I just look at it.
Let's just switch chairs.
Just chair.
That's that cash tech education, right?
All right.
Quan, why you get kicked out of cash?
You recording now, right?
Oh,
All right. Sound too?
right. So yeah, switch.
It don't matter. Yeah, I know what he said. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, he's right.
I actually said it first, but it's cool. Nobody want to give me any credit for anything. When we first started working on this about 2 years ago, it wasn't quite as simple as 7 or 8 guys sitting in a room talking about solutions, but when we filmed it, that's kind of how it looked on film. But as we began to work a little further, saw that the needs were a little greater than we first had imagined, it's kind of transformed. So now it's kind of more of a project. It's a living document. And in doing this project, one of the first things I did was take a ride through my old neighborhood. I began to think about where I grew up. You know, how does the block look? I could think back vividly how it looked as a kid when I was growing up, but things have changed. In many regards, the current state of education, that's a microcosm. I was public school educated, DPS, Detroit Public Schools. Went to Kyton Elementary School, went to Halter Middle School, Cass Technical High School. Those schools are not what they used to be. Cass Tech is, but when I took a ride through the old neighborhood, my elementary school is not what it used to be. Of course, the building is still there, but it's not what it used to be. The middle school that I went to, the building is still there. The neighborhood is still pretty decent, but we thought about what can we do to help support students who come from certain areas who need to matriculate through the educational system to provide them with the best resources possible. So that's kind of the motivation behind the project. Another thing about the project is I simply want it to be a piece of social commentary. Not everything you see you'll agree with. Not every solution that we come up with may work for you, or you may not agree with some of the solutions or some of the approaches, but I can guarantee you that it will be thought-provoking. Those who we have at the table have put a lot of time and effort into the development of their craft. And, you know, riding through my old neighborhood and riding through the neighborhoods of those who've contributed to this project has really put a lot of thoughts into our heads. And we sat down at the table, we sat down one-on-one, and we came up with some answers and we came up with some solutions. No longer will we be just people who exist in this field. We need to be the thought leaders. We need to have those thought-provoking conversations, to have the individuals come up with solutions that will help the students in which we serve. So gathered, we have 5, including myself, 4 very dynamic educators who, when I spoke to you all individually and actually had the privilege to witness you all in action and be familiar with your practice of educating our students, I know that within this room and the brain trust that's seated at this table, we can certainly identify what has been effective for you all, and ideally bring those effective strategies to scale to anyone who may be viewing or receiving this information from today's discussion. So we're going to come together as a group as we are, but then we're going to have a few breakout sessions where we can really drill down individuals and with the conversation, what has worked. We're going to be very particular, very precise, very concise with the solutions that we discuss for some of the concerns that exist But even within that, we have found a way to be successful. First, we'll begin with myself and Marquita Reese, and then we'll kind of rotate our way through, and then we'll reconvene at the end and kind of check in and debrief and see where we are. Everybody good with that format?
Indeed.
Anybody have any questions? All right, so Ms. Reese and I will go ahead and get started. We got a few areas right out here if you all want to mingle, if you will, and then we'll touch base and check in. Yes, please.
Hey, Rob.
You're inviting us to leave.
Right, inviting you to leave. How you've been able to have your lessons transcend the traditional classroom setting. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what it is that you do with your students and how effective it is?
Sure. So my background,
Yeah.
starting off, is I'm a math instructor,
Okay.
but I also have a background in science. So with that, my passion is garden. That's from the womb into current.
Okay.
I found a way to incorporate my passion with curriculum. And in doing so, I looked at the population that I am servicing. And then I looked at the disadvantages that exist for that population and how do I get them to understand that what we're doing in the classroom actually translate into something they can use in their communities, in their home, and in the world. And so doing that, I looked at how do I get them to understand, no matter what is out there for society, whatever society is saying, how do I get them to see where they are and grow from there?
Mhm.
And with that being said, we started the gardening or urban agricultural development process
Okay.
at the school. And so I had a real conversation with the students, which are all male students, and said that you may not have a job or you may not get a job, but you don't have a reason to not sustain yourself or your family
Mhm.
or your community. And the question became, well, how do you do that? And so I took a seed and said this one seed grows and develops into multiple seeds. And so if you know how to utilize that seed and to produce more seeds, you not only feed yourself, but you feed your family and you feed your community, and that feeds the world.
Yeah.
And so looking at that aspect, because they were like, well, how does this translate to math? So then we go and look at how does one produce 100?
Mhm.
How does that 100 produce 1,000? But not only speaking of, we had to put it into action. So we planted that seed. So now we're looking at that growth development. We're looking at, exponential growth. We're looking at math
Right.
in that. And then we have to look at, well, how is this possible? And then I introduced the 3 growing seasons. But with all of that, we're not even talking about the money that comes into play with that information. So first they had to get the knowledge, they had to see the connection with the classroom, and then they had to put their hands to work on a realistic goal.
So as you took me around and gave me a tour of the grounds, you also kind of shared with me how the water reservoirs came to be, and there was a little bit of trial and error and life lessons as well as math lessons and how that developed. Can you kind of share that with us?
So when we first initiated the garden, there was a problem from 300 feet of hose from the main campus to where the garden is. So we had to sit around and come up with how do you capture water and serve the purpose of watering the garden that you started, as opposed to doing 300 feet of hose every single day. So we sat in a class and I had the students to come up with some ideas. So now we're integrating how much water is needed, how long of a watering system, and how construction could be done if we took water catchment systems, how solid of a structure we could build and capsulize as much water as possible to serve that purpose. So I had them create models, and we used water bottles and straws. And so they did connective of pipes and all this, and then that system they created with small water bottles actually worked. And from there, we solicited aid and we received barrels. And so we started off with a collection system that captured rainwater from a shedding system that filtered into 5 to 6 barrels that was stacked in a pyramid. So now they're looking at how does math transcend to an actual doable structure.
Yeah.
So it's no longer how does the equation
Yeah.
work, it's now this is this equation in action. And so from there, we developed, okay, we have the water, what if it doesn't rain, or if it does rain, we have this water, how do we get it the power we need it? So then we infuse solar. So now we get into the science. How does solar energy transform to energy? So now I've got math, I got the science, and then now I also have to get them with social studies to understand the background information related to everything that we're trying to do.
And these experiences that you brought to your students are outstanding, and you use the term transcend. It certainly will and has transcended the classroom. These are life skills. These are skills to make a student self-sufficient. One thing I don't think we do enough of in educating our students is build those entrepreneur skills. This skill set will allow a student to not only feed himself, feed his family, but also potentially make profit off of this. Can you kind of speak to some of those things? Because one of our topics, of course, is best practices for educating students who live in or come from an impoverished area. But another is within the parameter of the current design, how do you maintain highly effective instruction and high numbers for student achievement? And I think we need to find multiple measures for student achievement. Certainly, I think one measure is that we're most familiar with are standardized scores, but I think other measures would be after high school quality of life measurements, perhaps income levels, perhaps, and it's hard to measure quality of life, that's kind of a loaded term, but certainly one measurement would be a student's ability to sustain his life or his family's life or make a living wage or a decent income. So can you kind of speak to some of those things and skills that are being built?
I presently have a student now that has now launched his own 100% organic beauty line from head to toe, and I'm actually participating in some of the things. And so we looked at people that couldn't afford insurance or have low average insurance. So me personally, I have eczema, and his son is not my friend. So he launched 2 soap lines. And so I tested both of those, and the one line that I'm bought into that I love, I'm using his hair conditioner, I'm using his moisturizing. Wow. So this student right now, using the things that are grown in the garden with the aid of other things, 100% organic, has launched a line fresh out of high school. So if we're instituting those from day one, middle school, high school, elementary school, those set in place entrepreneurial skills, then there's no limit. There's no looking back. So when we're measuring success, it's like first year in, you made this amount, per week. You did at this amount the month. That second semester, I expect that growth to be shown. So when you're graduating, I expect people to be buying into you and what you're doing. So I look a little beyond standardized scores, because some people can be great test takers, but nothing else going on with them. Yeah. So I measure what you've internalized from the classroom, and then now what you're producing that I can see that's tangible and that's sustaining.
Yeah. As the project developed further and I became more entrenched in the work, I was reminded of the narrative that we've often heard of the 2 Detroits, right? The old Detroit and the new Detroit, the rebirth, the gentrification. But as I began to work further, it became apparent to me that there are 3 Detroits. So you have the one Detroit, the old Detroit, that is viewed as being in ruins. I could take you to a few areas, drive you through a few neighborhoods, meet you at a few intersections, and you would kind of get the feel for what that old Detroit that is not as well preserved as it should have been. But then you have the old Detroit that is very well preserved, the Boston Edison areas, the Sherwood Forest, the University District, if you will, manicured lawns and sprawling lawns and very luxurious homes, as they should be. It gives you a real sense of the Detroit that once was. And then, of course, there's the new Detroit, what is deemed by some the rebirth of Detroit, the Stadium District, the townhomes, and the areas where there's been some new developments or redevelopments of what was. Now, the reason that this is important is because as educators, and we are charged with educating all students, there may be a different formula for educating students who come from one or the other of these three Detroits. We don't want to lower our expectations, ever, but we want to make sure that we are mindful of the needs of the students that we serve and the areas in which they come from. And Detroit is not just the only place to keep in mind. And when I say Detroit, or when I reference Detroit, I'm often referencing the Detroit metropolitan area, because those of us who educate students in one of our newer suburbs, if you will, often educate those students who come from Detroit who may have relocated, or parents who may have sought other options for their students and have taken them across that dividing line. So we have to be mindful of who we are serving and the needs of the students that are sitting in front of us, as well as this narrative of the three Detroits.
So I wanted to put together a program that would assist students in entering high school strong, right? And so this program pretty much is specifically designed for ninth graders, in which we kind of, pour into them all the supports that's needed, to promote success, academic success, social success, cultural success, ethical success, any type of, success we can think of. And so, with that being said, I mean, we focus on a couple aspects. We focus on building manhood among these students. We bringing first of all, going out to the community and being able to ask community members to come in and like, look, we have ninth grade black males that could use your support. And from that, people have come in. We have a wrestling program that's coming in that just having off of a conversation with somebody, and they ask, well, hey, would you mind bringing that? I would. Yoga is coming in.
Okay.
We've had relationships with local universities in which they're flooding our schools with student teachers, right? Yeah. Where they could be assistants in the classroom. They assist students one-on-one as well, So this all happened just because the relationships we had, but being able to ask our community members.
Right.
Bringing in, I mentioned yoga, gardening, cooking classes. These like sort of non-traditional things that you wouldn't think of like in the school, especially for all boys.
Right.
But being able to make money while you're in school, entrepreneurship. We have a t-shirt production class, entrepreneurship class coming in as well. And so in school suspensions, being able to do away with what we know for the past 25 years hasn't worked, which is suspending students, sending them out of the school, and so we want to...
Let me just interject real quick, so I want to kind of dissect a few of the finite points that you brought up. Okay. One, if I am an administrator,
that's right,
and I have a teacher who says to me, I want to bring in these programs, I want to bring in yoga, I want to bring in wrestling, I want to bring in gardening. One reservation I might have is, how does this impact the bottom line? And not the bottom line dollar amount, the bottom line student achievement.
Yeah.
How would you persuade me that this is a solution? Because all we're talking about today are solutions.
Yeah. So
how would you persuade?
So I think that especially when you're dealing with the age of students that I deal with, high school students, we talk a lot about teacher buy-in.
Yeah.
But even at the secondary level, high school level as well, that student buy-in is probably just on pars with the teachers. And so we know, like after fourth grade, scores and academic success of particularly black boys starts to teeter out. And if there's something we can do to get them to have buy-in, where it's not like, I hate school. It's like, no, I want to be in school, because this is the dopest place that I can, I can show up and I can do, it builds buy-in amongst the students, and it builds culture. And so, although there may not be any type of assessment to show that, hey, building culture will increase. But what we do know that, you have a culture, you have a student buy-in, you're going to have academics that's going to increase because of that. Because first of all, the student is there. Absenteeism increases because, you may have students feel like, I don't want to be here. I don't feel like I'm wanted here.
All right. Okay. I got you.
So building that buy-in among students will increase just because that they want to be at that school.
Okay, so let me kind of help anyone who may be watching kind of navigate their way through and make sure they understand what the solution is in the program that you're developing.
Okay.
If we're talking about improving student achievement in the traditional sense of the measurement or in the non-traditional abstract sense of the measurement, one way we can do that is buy-in. Yeah. Buy-in will make a student more likely to come to school as well as make them more engaged while they're in school. Yeah. If you could build a program that's supported by the community, which is one of our topics, you knocked on doors and found a yoga instructor who'd be willing to come in. You knocked on doors or made phone calls. You say you spent this whole summer building this resource pool of individuals, a wrestling program, a yoga program in conjunction with other teachers in your building, a gardening program. Planting that entrepreneurial seed in your students to build that buy-in to ideally improve student achievement. In addition to the 9th grade program, the initiation program that you referenced, or as a part of that program, I know one thing we discussed was you want to do away with suspensions. Yeah. As an educator or any teacher who may be listening may think, well, a referral or a suspension is not the first tool in the box I reach for, but certainly where relationships break down and other efforts to redirect may not be working, a referral or a suspension is a valuable tool that I would typically have at my disposal. But your program wants to do away with that. Kind of tell me why and kind of tell me the thought process behind it and what do you think?
So the thought process behind it is, again, I work with all black males, black boys, and so one of the things that we know that has happened is that when it comes to being recommended for special education, when it comes to being labeled, when it comes to being suspended and expelled, black boys have the lion's share of the percentages, and so and it's not because that they're worse than other races or because they do things more behavior-wise than other races. Is because of the perception and because of their race, they tend to be suspended and expelled and recommended and labeled more because of that. And so we don't want to be a catalyst for that. As a black male that's in front of black boys, I don't want to be the person who says I'm gonna follow like the statistics and I'm gonna suspend you behind. What we know is that actually has a deleterious effect on students. Like, you may think that, I suspend them, they'll come back, better, and they might not come back at all, right? And we talk about buy-in. What better way to crush buy-in than to tell a student, I don't want to see you no more. I don't want to see you in here. I can throw you away. And so a student may not feel like, I don't belong here, because even the teacher wants me to leave, right? And so I think that one of the things with doing away with suspensions and having an alternative to suspension, which is getting to the root of the issue why you're getting suspended in the first place, right? And so if it's definitely an issue, that means it's something that needs to be talked through. Counseling is something that our boys don't benefit from. I mean, I'm saying it's beneficial, but it's not offered to our kids in a meaningful way. So counseling, anger management, restorative practices.
So you're not suggesting we just do away with suspensions. You're suggesting we replace suspensions with more effective measures. With more effective counseling, restorative practices, maybe suggesting that for this particular type of behavior displayed that's undesirable, this is the remedy. And for this particular symptom, if you will, this is the remedy. But not just doing away with suspensions for the sake of doing away with suspensions. Purposefully replacing them.
Yeah, so not saying that we're doing away with discipline.
Correct.
We're not doing away with discipline. We're not doing away with getting to the root of the matter. We're actually putting more effort, embracing that young man instead of pushing him away, So this is what, in school. You're not going to be absent from school. You're still going to get your academics, you know. But we're going to figure out, you know, we're not leaving until we figure out what's going on, you know.
All right.
And listen, and we put in some effective alternative behaviors, you know. We discussed those as well, you know. And so I think that that's something that, you know, that we definitely need, because again, you know, suspensions have proven not to work.
Okay. So I look forward to checking back in with you in a few months to kind of get some of those checkpoints, some of those measurements to see how successful the program has. And I have no doubt that it'll be successful. I'm just looking forward to seeing the success you've had so that we can document that and share that out and expound upon that with other educators in the field.
So when you talk about community, that's major key, right? And so a lot of things that you're seeing right now is that students are no longer going to school in their communities, oftentimes, right? They're also not going to church in their communities. So when you had parents that were missing the mark, which has always existed, there was oftentimes, if you went to your school in your community or the church in your community, there was like a net that caught you. Well, now you have kids that are taking a bus, you know, going to school and then going home. No one knows the story of like what's happening. So in the areas where it's a community school within a community, you all are able to do more there by going out and seeing, like, engaging the community, right? But then when there's a school where it's mostly kids that are being imported, you know, that takes even more diligence in going out and trying to build the community. Because one thing I've noticed is that the great grandmothers of these children are the ones who are kind of the most stable and are the ones that they can go to, whose phone number never changes, whose address never changes. But great grandma is dying now, you know. And so, like, I think it's a Kendrick Lamar verse that says, you know, my grandma's dead, so who's gonna pray for me now? I mean, so it's kind of like when the pillars are leaving, there's no one in place of it.
Well, so we work in the same school, and when I was hearing you, I was trying to figure out where I want to jump in, because a lot of the stuff you're talking about, I wasn't feeling, to be honest. The issue we have is our kids are primarily not from that community. And so a lot of the solutions that you brought up are not a real solution for us. Because we had people come to our school that were from the school. They graduated from the school, they were alumnus, and they were from a variety of backgrounds and what they had accomplished. And our kids were like, you know, they weren't providing those people with the right type of attention. And I don't want to paint all the kids like that, you know, but it was too many of them that was that way.
You know, we're in Midtown, so a lot of our kids are not from Midtown. Okay. So when I say community, what I mean is that we share a particular point in time. We share particular characteristics as well, right? And there's ways of building community.
I think it's very important that we address a few likely misconceptions that we know exist within this field or this profession. And oftentimes, educators, when they know that students come from certain areas that may be impoverished or communities that may be underserved or underserviced, the misconception is that teachers or administrators begin to make a correlation between a student's or family's level of income and the student's level of intelligence. And that's a big misconception. And if we're not careful, that misconception or that false correlation can become a self-fulfilling prophecy for the students in which we service. Meaning, if we receive students from a certain area, certain neighborhood, and we believe that they are not as intelligent or as smart as some of their counterparts, and we project that false perception onto them, they may underperform to meet our low expectations. Now, this notion is manifested in a number of ways, one of which is what we've heard described as the pipeline to prison, which is often fostered, unfortunately, through an overzealous number of suspensions or expulsions from school. And when that occurs, students begin to see themselves as less than. And we as educators have to be careful. We're not saying do away with discipline. We're not saying that, no, you should not suspend students. But what we are saying is that we as educators have to be careful of the correlations that we may make for the students that we serve and the abilities that they come to us with. It's incumbent upon us to teach, nurture, foster the intelligence, the gifts, the talents that our students possess so that they may become citizens to the best of their ability to contribute to society. And here we are near the end of the school year, and we're privileged to have this conversation with you again. You were on the cusp of some very innovative things when we spoke before. And I just want to touch base with you now that we have about a year under your belt with these innovations to kind of see how they're going. One was you spoke of getting rid of suspensions, or at least attempting to. Not getting rid of discipline, but trying some alternatives. How's that working? If you have any numbers to kind of throw at us so we can analyze, that would be helpful. But even if it's anecdotally, what do you have that we can maybe chew on? Maybe we can see what we can do to help our schools.
Yeah, so we were able to reduce suspensions by 39% this school year. Part of the reason we were able to do that is that we use alternative to suspensions. We used a lot of in-school detention, restorative practices, and also we had a program known as Check and Connect, where we had a near-peer worker that would go and actually students who were referred to the office, they would meet with this person and come up with other ways to reduce problematic behavior. I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
Yeah, and so that was some of the main things we've done. Also using, we have quite a bit of counselors on staff at the school, and so being able to use not only individual counseling with the students, but also family counseling that work well as far as with reducing suspensions for our students.
Okay, so I know that you are, although you're a teacher, you also have the credentials of a counselor.
That's right.
So you are able to kind of maybe serve double duty at times if you kind of sense or pick up on some things that maybe is best for you to put on your counselor hat, take that off, then put on your teacher's hat. Another thing I wanted to touch base with you on, you had mentioned the importance of involving the community. But in this particular instance, you reached a little further than the immediate community, and you reached all the way up to the University of Michigan. I remember visiting you on a Friday at your school about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and you had some partner providers on site. Kind of give us an idea of how that program looks and what you were able to do to kind of attract such a talented program to work with your students.
Okay, so the program you're talking about, University of Michigan is one of our partners, but Wayne State as well. And so with Wayne State University, are you talking about the interns?
Both.
Okay.
Let's talk about
both. I'll start with Wayne State. With Wayne State University, we were able to partner with them to include interns at our school. As you know, I work at the only all-male public school in the state of Michigan. And so nationwide, males in particular are having issues within the school during the school day. And those problems are exacerbated, especially with black males. And so that's 100% of our population are black males. And so what Wayne State tries to do is to actually have teachers, student teachers, come into a school like ours and learn what are the best practices of dealing with male students, and in particular black male students, and then being almost like a proving ground for what works with our students. And so we were able to have one master teacher and two student teachers inside of each 9th grade classroom, not only to provide extra help for students who needed that one-on-one attention, but also to train newly teachers who are graduating out of university to learn those best practices. So when they get into the field, they won't make the mistakes that we've been making all along in dealing with male students.
So quick question, before we get to the other partnerships you have, some of these partnerships that you were able to establish were as simple as, and I don't want to minimize it, but were as simple as you going to these providers or these institutions and engaging them in conversation. And in many instances, it was at no charge to the school or to the district. And these are things that you're doing from the lens of a teacher. Many people who contribute to the think tank it's a vast assortment, but many have been administrators. But in this particular instance, you're at the classroom level, and you've been given the autonomy from your leadership to engage in these conversations, to speak with these providers, and ultimately bring these resources to bear for the betterment of your students. Can you speak a little bit about the partnership that you have with other universities?
Okay. So U of M, we've had a long-standing partnership with U of M where they provide art for our students. Not only just art, but also social art. What that means is that they learn like the history behind various art. They learn when it was implemented. They learn about the times in which it was implemented. And with that, we're able to have distant museum tours. We do a lot of video tours with other museums across the nation. And also we do lots of trips. And that's something that comes free of charge, straight from U of M. There's a professor that comes in and teach classes on these different subject topics as well.
Okay.
Those are the university partnerships. We have partnerships with the Campaign for Black Male Achievement. That's a national organization that provide not only funds but also thought partners that comes in and help to pretty much establish a narrative and best practices with dealing with our young men. We also have a partnership with the Future Project. That's a program in which young men learn about what they're going to do in the future, right? And they do things along the way through the year to actually promote whatever their future goals are.
Okay.
But on top of that, those are names right there. Skillman is a partner of ours as well. The Union is a partner. The Union with a Y is a partner with us as well. But the main partnerships come from the parents and the community.
Okay.
We have everyday community members that sacrifice their time, whether it's barbers, whether it's plumbers. We have an electronic systems technician that comes in and teach certification classes to our juniors and seniors. Our first inaugural group will be certified this week, actually. And so that's the most valuable partnerships. All of them are valuable, but our most valuable and most sustainable partnerships comes from the parents and the community of the students that we serve.
Outstanding. Speaking of community, give us an idea of where you're from, where you grew up, where you were educated, and what role, if any, does that play in impacting the lives of the students you serve? Yeah,
so I was born and raised in Detroit. Grew up on the east side as well as the west side. I graduated from Mumford High School, graduated from Wayne State University. So I've never left the city. Okay. And so, initially I had no plans on being a teacher. I started off in material science engineering. I did a year of volunteering at Peter Vital School. And with this, the church that I worked for is Rosedale Park Baptist Church. They actually had, offices and partnerships with this school. This is where that whole community partnership comes from as far as what I know that works. And so with that, I did AmeriCorps, and they placed me at this church, which in turn placed me at this school. And so they gave me an office. I was behavior interventionist, and what that pretty much meant, as an 18 and 19-year-old, I received students who were getting in trouble in school. They didn't suspend the students, but they sent them to me.
You have to engage the parents. The state, not knocking the state don't know what to do with our kids. I've heard 2 state superintendents, Inkster, Pontiac, Ecorse, Ben Harbors, Detroit. If they had the answer, they would have did it a long time ago. We have the answer in this room. And what have worked for me, I'm in a small community, partnerships with some of these churches, whether they get these parents on board. And the parents, and not make them feel intimidated, because in one of these priority schools, i.e. free reduced lunch, some parents had a bad experience with school. And we come across, and we have to break that barrier. And once you do that, and you have to meet them I go to Tuesday, once a month I go to a local church Bible study. And I catch those grandmothers. I'm in a small district. And I'm kind of in a unique situation, because the district I'm in, I graduated from the school, my father and my grandfather. We had a lady on the news, Miss Ethel Stevens, last week, 106 years old. If you saw it on Fox 2, she can remember when Ecorse and How to Drive was dirt roads. And I bring her in, and she got all the grandmamas and the great grandmamas, and it's collaborative. If you come here, get a check 8 o'clock, leave at 4, you might as well pack up and go someplace else, because our kids need emergency room. Actually, I put the watch on. I gotta make it. Yeah, that's why I make it.
Fix your pocket, man.
Fix it for me. That's why you're here. Make sure you good. Hold on.
We good. All right, so we are here. Quick interview. Want to go over a few things. Again, we're solution oriented. Got a few dynamic leaders here in the building. A few people behind me taking a quick look at some data that's hot off the press. So today's conversation should be very enriching. I have with me Kenneth McFall. I just want to kind of get a feel for you and your style of leadership, your style as an educator. In that, if you could kind of give me an idea of where you grew up, and you have a very unique set of circumstances because you are an administrator that have the privilege of serving in the same district in which you were raised, the same district in which you graduated from. When we spoke before, those dynamics became very apparent and very evident. I thought it'd be good to kind of pull you out, to kind of have you elaborate further and kind of give us an idea.
Well, okay, I tell you what. My name is Kenneth McFall. I graduated from Ecorse High School in 1979. My father graduated in 1959. My grandfather, we've been in Ecorse for 112 years. It's a pleasure for me to come back and work in the community that I'm from. But really, the focal point of this think tank and dealing with all the men from charter schools to public schools, we are using our knowledge to enable and enhance our kids. So one of the proud things, we talk about that background piece. I spent 12 years in Detroit Public Schools. I've been at Ecorse for 12 years. So altogether, 24, 25 years of public education in urban settings.
So you're very experienced. What I kind of want to speak about, we've spoken before about the importance of building those positive relationships. Being that you work in a community in which you were raised, how has that connection helped you to impact the lives of the students that you serve?
Well, from a longitudinal level, I get a chance to work with the local ministers, work with the police, sponsor a Pee Wee team, be a part of the community, not just a stakeholder. And where those shortfalls, we operate on a tier 1, 2, tier 3 level. When we see a kid who is not doing whatever they need to do, we have a 60-90 rule. We take those kids who are deficient and we bring them in after school with our partnership with Wayne State, which is called C2 Pipeline. We do a lot of after school intervention as well as in the day with reading labs. Okay,
so I know we've spoken before. You have some successes to kind of champion. You have mentioned and referenced some boosts or gains in your recent SAT data. Can you kind of expound and elaborate a little bit?
Well, I tell you what, it's a team. I don't want to say I believe in we. My team, my teachers at Ecorse, they have gotten together and really looked at the PSAT scores, and we got the kids who were close, and we worked with them very intensely. And the kids, we grouped them in gold, metal, and silver. The gold ones was the ones who scored benchmark 400 SAT, and those kids who was between 350 and 325, we know they can get over to 360. That's that threshold. We gave those kids some intense intervention. And I am proud to say with my team, not just me, we went from 2 with a composite of over 1,000 to 14. And that is a monumental gain for us out of 75 kids.
That's huge. That's a significant amount of growth in a relatively short period of time. And I know you attribute a lot to the team, but structurally, I'm sure you all have some things in place that not just the staff find beneficial, but obviously the kids and the community at large find that's working as well.
I tell you what, one of the biggest things I have to go back is with Kaplan. We had a summer institute, very intense for 3 weeks. It was voluntary. Also, we partnership with Eastern Michigan. They were able to bring kids up for a 4-week intense boot camp 4 Saturdays before. I attribute that. It was a multitude of factors, but those are the 2 big keys. nucleuses.
Okay. Give me an idea what your day is like. What time do you arrive? What's one of the first things that you do? Because what we're really trying to do is dig deep into what can we do or what information can we share that will help other schools across the nation kind of bring our success to scale.
Well, that's a great question, Mr. Russell. My day consists of I hit the school anywhere from 7 to 7:15. Do a perimeter check, interior, making sure everything is okay. And also in the morning time when I walk in, I get a chance to look and see who changed their boards, did they change the dates, and kind of take the lesson plan, whether it's on my phone or on my computer, and see really are they being compliant or are they really teaching. And when I look around at each board in the morning before I start my day, come in, check our online to make sure nobody called in sick, staff according to that. Our buses, our staff get there at 7:30, 7:45, make sure the lunchroom is operating, and we have a thing we call advisory, which old school they call it a homeroom. So my day can go from check my emails perpetually all day. So I don't have just a lock-in time. Greet all the kids, greet all the buses. I try to do my re-admits or any other issues I have with the union during a teacher's prep period. Have a designated time for parents. On a basketball night, I may not get out of there until 11 o'clock at night. That's extreme, but that happens.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really understand or realize the hours that go into this profession to do it right, to do it correctly, the investment of time that it takes, and the attention to detail. I bet you if you were to actually sit down and write out and regiment your day, which you may already do, you'll find that almost every single minute, every single second is accounted for. A good friend of mine who we'll speak to later kind of introduced me to the importance of hard planning, hard scheduling your day. And what it does for me is it helps me to control those things that I can control. Because when you sit in these seats of administration, things come at you from all angles. But the more you have planned out, at least if you do get off track, you kind of know where you went off track to kind of help guide you back because you've gone to put out this fire or to handle or respond to that concern. So there's a lot that goes into this work.
Well, I tell you what, as far as the appointments, I look at my Google Calendar. It's linked to the district calendar as well as my personal calendar. I'm always looking at that. But as far as time, the most important thing when I look at you asking me how do we move test scores, I look at kids, students as my clients, not as consumers. And every kid needs something different.
A lot of hard work went into the development of the think tank. I've been at this for well over 2 years. In this time, I've had the privilege of meeting several other dedicated professionals, teachers, counselors, administrators, parents, students, concerned citizens. It's really ran the whole gambit. And I've put in a lot of hours, reviewed a lot of footage, done a lot of research, met with a lot of people, had a lot of conversations, drank a lot of coffee, spent countless hours at the computer, going around the city, getting footage. And in fact, one of the things that you as viewers may find surprising or hopefully you find enlightening, my son actually helped with a lot of this filming. He became entrenched in this project as well. And in times where there was no other cameraman around, Junior was entrusted to capture that angle and capture those moments. But we found that we have something here. Very proud of this work, very proud of those who are invested in this project, happy for those who have found answers and solutions as they've reviewed the footage. And, I'm just looking forward to these continued partnerships. I hope we pack the house every time that it screens. I hope that when we make this video available to other educators that they find the value in it that I know I have found in working on this project. I'm looking forward to continued work in this particular area and domain because this is what's needed, particularly for this region, but not limited to this area. This is a project that can help students, teachers, educators all over the world. We're going to kind of have a conversation that we would normally have and our peer group as we normally would, but we're gonna have the benefit and luxury of recording this so that others can kind of see how we interact regularly on a regular basis. So we have congratulations are in order for Tracy Causey Bryant, who just became a principal.
Thank you.
Principal of a K4 building,
Yes.
so lower L. We have with us again our resident expert, Damon Williams, who is the K8 administrator who has seen exponential growth and success in the time he's been with his school. They've gone from the 14th to the 53rd percentile, and again, for those who may not be familiar with the system of measurement in the state of Michigan, top to bottom ranking. So they've gone from the 14th to the 53rd. Data hasn't not been released yet for the next school year's measurement, but we expect to see even more growth from this school. So Damon, kind of guide us through some tips, some words of encouragement, some words of advice for Tracy as she embarks upon this new journey to give her a head start to propel her to the same and greater success as you've seen.
Absolutely. So Tracy and I talked a little bit outside of here, but just want to reiterate the important piece of you coming in as a new principal, establishing those relationships, because I think that is the core of success in everything that you do. So thinking about going in there and having a plan, or how am I going to meet with my staff members? How am I going to get that face-to-face time to let them know, okay, look, I'm here. We have one goal, one mission. We want to educate our kids. So I think one of the most important things that you can do is establish that relationship and let them know your why. And then from letting them know your why, let them establish their own why. And one thing we didn't talk about right there is after you get, we started our conversation about starting with the why.
Right.
What we did, what I would encourage you to do. So I talked to you about having your why.
Yes.
Then letting the staff members share their why.
Right.
Then let them collaborate with one another. Oh, we did talk about that.
We did.
Yeah. And then you have that big why for the entire school. And then that's what you go back on. So that why could become your core values. Now that can go into your core, but now you always talk everything we do. Remember, we exist because we love our kids and we want them to be successful.
Yes.
We exist because we know it's the best thing to do, so just having that.
Yes.
Certainly. So Damon, when we spoke earlier, I took down a few notes that I certainly plan on using for my own implementation, but I kind of want to focus back on some of those things. We talked about if we were the building blocks of a successful institution, in your eyes, would be first establishing that culture and climate piece. Then once you have that layer installed, then focusing on instruction. Another thing that helps you stay focused and task oriented is you have what you call a hard schedule. Can you kind of touch briefly and concisely on some of those things and how Tracy might consider that style of implementation as a remedy to some of the challenges that may exist?
Yes. So as a first year principal, it's going to be overwhelming. The things that are going to be on your plate are going to feel like they're coming so fast. So what I would advise you to do is literally hard schedule. I don't know if you have Outlook, where you can schedule from 6:30 to 7 o'clock. I am checking my email.
Okay.
From 7:30 to 8:15, I am doing walkthroughs. I'm going around and simply saying hello to all of the teachers and students.
Okay.
From 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I'm looking at data, information. I even hard schedule my lunch, and it don't always go as planned, but from 11:30 to 12, I'm gonna eat lunch, and I'm gonna check emails during that time. From 1 to 2, I'm gonna call back parents. But I think for your success, because it get overwhelming, and you can look and say, okay, what am I doing right now, and go ahead. But with that plan, it's almost like as a teacher with a lesson plan.
That's right.
Do you always stick to it? No. You may have to deviate from it. However, if you have that plan, you know what direction to go in. That'll help you tremendously. And I didn't do it till my second year. And it was like, it was a world of difference from me hard scheduling everything that I did to just freestyling.
All right. And it helps with organization.
Helps with organization. And that was one of my my constraints, something that I had to work on. And now I feel like, okay, I'm pretty organized. You see my desk, you be like, oh, maybe not. But I know where everything is. So it's a pile here. I know that's there. So, but it did help tremendously with organization. And I think it'll help you be successful.
One of the things, and Tracy, feel free to jump in whenever you want. One of the things you mentioned, I certainly can attest to. For Tracy to be named the principal, obviously she's shown success in her previous role, her current role,
in any role in which he's existed. But when you become a principal, it comes at you from all angles.
Absolutely.
And there is no place to hide when the buck stops with you.
Absolutely.
There's no one to pass it to. There's no
Right.
one to delegate to. There are certain things that is your sole responsibility. And you may have a hard schedule that you try to stick to, and you may have something that comes from out of nowhere, and it may throw your whole day, potentially your whole week off. And there's really no way to plan for that. But certainly having a hard schedule helps you adapt and adjust, because not having one, you're really thrown off course. If you have one, at least you know where you were
Right.
thrown off course, and you can, go back to it. Yeah.
And prioritize.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things that I say I have to do is get in classrooms.
Okay.
I feel like I'm an instructional coach. Now, somebody else may say I need to prioritize emails and phone calls. I typically try to do the phone calls after school for the most part.
Okay.
But and I set that window as well. I don't want to stay to 7 o'clock every day.
Right.
So I make sure that I'm able to do what I need to do after school to a certain point, so I can go spend time with my family as well.
Okay.
So it's prioritizing. As Kente mentioned, when things do get thrown at you, you do still need to, okay, now let me go back to my list. What do I need to do? I haven't been in classrooms all day. I need to go in there, show my face, say hello. I may need to do observation. So a walkthrough is different from an observation.
Right.
But I think it's setting that whole atmosphere for you. And I know you as a coach.
Right.
You coached me, and it was excellent. You
Look at you.
Yeah. No, you gave that great feedback.
Yeah.
So what would you do differently? I was
Yeah.
like, have that objective on the board. I remember that to this day. That was 6 years ago.
Yes.
But to that end, the type of personality that you're letting them know that I'm here to coach you. I'm here to help you.
Right.
Because you have a new staff.
In the past, I used the NWEA at my school, and what I found to help was to make them part of the process. So I'm not the only keeper of the information. So we would look at it, like, this is what it's saying. What do you feel about that? And then I think it was like the Descartes at that time. You can look and see, like, okay, this is the area in which it's saying that maybe you're having a challenge with. What do you think about that? So making them part of the data.
For the most part, they might have an idea of what they want to do. Especially for high school students. They may say, okay, I want to go to college, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then in the same breath say, I don't care about this assessment. This SAT isn't important. So if you can truly identify in your students kind of what they want, what they're interested in, and then teach on that level, they tend to take those things seriously because, this will impact my life. This will impact where I want to go. And so I think having that relationship is powerful in creating that idea of motivation for them.
I've seen both areas of what students coming into college and the hardship that they're having, as well as I K-12 instructor as well. So one of the things that I would like to contribute, especially since we're talking solutions, is that bridge, and that's a big word that we, especially in college right now, they're talking about the bridge and co-requisite models and things like that, and how can we use these tools to better educate our students and get them prepared for that next level.
Basically, I listened to a lot of the ideas, and what I'm hearing, which I feel is solution-oriented, is having that open dialogue, and that's something that I did with my students. For some reason, the students, as well as some of my educators, felt like it was a secret that the kids were not included in knowing what their scores were. More importantly, I know you mentioned the Achieve 3000. Well, we do DRA assessments, and that's assessing the students' reading level where they are. But again, I challenge my teachers to let each one of my students know I pay for a folder for every student in the building, a binder, if you will, and these are the students' data binders. And so I let the teachers know I want every one of my students, kindergarten included, to know what their DRA level is, their reading level, to know what their NWEA goal is. So that goal is based on whatever their previous assessment was, and it's kind of formulated on where they were prior to taking it or where they should be at that grade level. So now that the students are understanding what those numbers are, when they see me, and they see me every single day, I'm liable to ask any kid in my building a question, what is your DRA level? So when we take that next DRA assessment again, what is your goal? So if they are at a level 16, for an example, and their grade level should be a 22, 24, I'm asking them, so you're at a 16, how many points do you need to get to a 22? Or do you know what you need to get to by the end of this school year? I ask them what their NWEA goals are. So not only am I asking my teachers to share this information, I've provided resources so that every student in my building has some type of document that they can put their hands on. They write their scores down. They have conversations, and then I let them talk to their parents during parent-teacher conferences. Have the conversation with mom. Let the kids drive the conversation and say, this is what my score is, this is what I should be. And when they meet those goals, I celebrate, and I celebrate with them. I make it a big deal. We have weekly meetings on Fridays. Having our Fantastic Friday, I am liable to give a shout out in the middle of an assembly to a kid that basically came to me excited that he knew what his goal was, and as soon as that score popped up on that computer, the first person he wanted to go to was the principal. And so I make sure that I celebrate those successes.
We had a conversation at the start of the school year, going back to August.
Yes.
At that time, you were newly hired, newly appointed as principal.
Indeed.
We had a conversation a few months ago about midway, and we were able to check in. Your energy levels were still high. You were still enthused, and here we are near the end of the school year, just a couple of weeks left. So it's really a great time for us to check in, kind of get a feel for your progress and the challenges you may have had throughout this school year, and really expound upon those solution-oriented items that you found to be successful for you in this school year. But I kind of want to start with you as a person. Give me an idea of where you grew up, where you were raised, where you were educated, and how that has helped to propel you to be the dynamic leader that you are.
Well, I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I was raised on the east side of Detroit.
Okay.
Very proud of it. I attended Kettering High School.
Yes.
It is now a closed building.
Yeah.
However, many great people came from Kettering
Yes.
High School. I'm very proud of my background.
Yeah.
Very proud.
Indeed, indeed. How does that show to the students that you serve? You work in a community that's considered by some a suburb of the city of Detroit. But when I spoke to you about the socioeconomic status of the students in which you serve, I was surprised to find what the free and reduced lunch marker is what for your school?
Our school is 82% free and reduced lunch.
Okay.
And in answering that, I inform my students quite often the connections, that understanding that although we are in a suburban area, my students still come from a high poverty background.
Indeed.
And I do make those connections with letting them know that I understand growing up on the east side of Detroit what poverty looks like as well as what it feels like.
A lot of times our students see us and they see the polished persons that we have grown to be, and they don't really understand where we come from or where we were raised and some of the hardships that we may have faced. And I've always learned throughout my career it's very important that we never lose that side of us. As polished as we may be, that our students still understand that yes, we have done what it takes to position ourselves in life, but there's still something within us that they can identify with. And I think that's important that you are able to maintain that. How has the effective use of data impacted your success this school year?
I also look at progress monitoring. So I look at my data from three perspectives: attendance, and I call it ABC data, attendance, behavior, and content.
Okay.
And so what I do is we constantly are revisiting what our trends are telling us. Our trends inform our next steps. For attendance, we have been focusing on trying to increase, of course, our daily attendance rates. In addition to that, for behaviors, that's something that I took made it a personal project. Being a first-year principal, I make it my business to build those relationships with my students. In addition to that, I am trying to create a mindset where my students understand how important the culture is in our building. So I'm teaching my students skills like using their words, hands off, informing others of how they feel and being accountable when they do make mistakes. So my first go-to is not suspension. It is a sit-down conversation, and I do a lot of conversations with my students.
Yeah, and that's a question that I ask you. Most of my experience has been at the middle school, high school level as a teacher as well as an administrator. So I was asking you a moment ago off camera, is suspensions a thing for elementary? I do know people who work in elementary settings, and I hear some of the concerns that they have, and I wonder what would some of the responses be. You know, and you just stated your go-to was not to suspend, but you built in some other responses, and also I imagine some preventative things that are implemented to kind of address that. Tell us a little bit about that.
So suspensions are a thing at the elementary level. And for one reason, I believe it's because our students are learning how to do school. They are learning some fundamental basics about how to interact sociably. And sometimes they don't have those skills to quite know how to resolve conflict. So what I do now is focus and hone in on teaching my students the appropriate skills on how to identify when it's something that you don't like. And communicating that to the opposing person or to their counterparts. But I started it off with role play and just engaging in regular conversations to getting to the root of where their anger may have been stemming from. But one important point that has basically given me a lot of gains is catching my students in the morning and getting a pulse of what their day is. So I greet my students every morning. I'm outside when the buses roll into the parking lot. I am smiling and hugging and high-fiving, but I'm also getting an idea of what student is coming with a facial expression or some body language that's communicating to me that it's not a great morning. And those students I immediately identify quickly, and I tell them, wait for me in my office door, I want to talk to you for a moment. And sometimes it's for a 2-minute conversation, sometimes it's just a check-in. And 9 times out of 10, when I catch that facial expression, it has deemed to be needed.
My sheep know me.
Yes.
And I know my sheep.
That's right.
Yeah,
Indeed.
absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely. So I thank you for the work and your contributions to the think tank. I wanted to make it a priority to speak with you at various intervals throughout the school year to kind of check in because I literally grow quite a bit each time we have a conversation. So my goal is to kind of capture that on camera so that anyone else who's in this profession can see it and be inspired. I thank you for your contributions. If there's any particular note on which you want to take us out on, feel free. You have the floor.
Well, I certainly do appreciate that. This work that we are doing, I believe, is changing lives.
Indeed.
I know the impact that we leave on our students. I am reminded daily, if I didn't tell my students something kind or show them kindness, I make sure that I share it with their parents when I see them in the parking lot. I don't like for my communication to be a negative communication.
Indeed.
I like to find the good in all of my students as well as my staff. I believe in spoiling my students and my staff, and I take pride in doing that. It's one of the greatest services that one could be in. I absolutely love what I do.
Indeed. Tracy Causey Bryant, thank you very much. I
Thank you for
appreciate your
having me.
contributions.
All
Always
right.
a pleasure.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how you're going to top that, Quan. I've learned quite a bit more about MTSS this school year. We've been doing a little research and effective ways to implement an MTSS system. So what we've done is we've taken a universal screener. We use the NWEA examination. We identify initially any student who scored in the bottom 25th percentile. From there, we monitor those students' success for about 4 to 6 weeks, which is about enough time to give us a quarterly progress report grade. And those students who were in the 25th percentile initially, and when we look at their quarterly progress report grade, if they are at a D or E in the class, those become our students who we consider for MTSS Tier 2 supports and interventions. We look at a few other numbers, such as attendance, such as behavioral concerns, or if a student already receives specialized services, or if they have an IEP. If a student has attendance concerns, we respond to those students' needs in a different manner. If a student has an IEP or already receives specialized services, some of the interventions we would normally provide in Tier 2 are already provided through that student's particular IEP services. So now we're looking at a list of students that consists primarily of, they're here most of the time. However, they scored in the bottom 25th percentile and they currently have a D or E in their class. Then we come up with strategies that specifically address their specified needs or concerns. But one of our challenges is matching personnel or having personnel to give us a particular ratio of 1 to 5 or 1 to 3 so that we can drill down and address those needs. But I've said a mouthful, but I want to know how MTSS or RTI works for you all. What are some best practices that we may want to keep in mind if we are at a school where we want to implement a similar program, or you can take that anywhere in any which direction you all like.
So our response intervention is similar to what you do. We identify, so we have 740 kids in the school. They all take the NWA test at the beginning of the year. So we identify the students at the bottom 25th percentile at the very beginning. Now, the students that are in the bottom 25th percentile, well, so this is all hard scheduled in. So it's very important to hard schedule it because at a certain point in time, we flood the grade level. So all core instruction stops for 30 minutes. And then what we do is that we have parapros as well as academic specialists as well as a teacher that will help support with those students. So we've adopted some programs because parapros aren't teachers. So we said, what can we do to help those paraprofessionals out that can, where the students will get the instruction. So we have something called CAMS and STAMS, Cards and Stars. Then we use the Ames Web. I don't know if you're familiar, Ames Web Plus to kind of monitor. So progress monitoring is crucial. So basically here's what happens. So first grade, kindergarten, first grade, so on and so forth. So for a certain time, let's say 9 and 9:30. All core instruction stops. All the students in the bottom 25th percentile goes into one classroom. We have typically 4 or 5, including the teacher, in there to support small groups. The students from the 26th to the 49th percentile goes with, we have three sections of every grade. They go 26th to 49th go into a classroom with another teacher that are giving them the things they need below grade level based off formative assessment. So she or he is able to kind of gauge from there. And then you have the high students because during that 30-minute time, we have the students that's at grade level and above going to another room and another teacher is assessing them and seeing what they can do to go to another level as well. So when I say our success going from the 17th percentile to the 53rd percentile, a lot of that is entailed of focusing on not only the bottom students, but as well as the top students, because oftentimes people tend to forget about, like in the program, the system that we have in place, you'll forget about the other students. But if core instruction is stopping for 30 minutes, what is occurring for those other scholars that are not getting that? So we've formulated our system around, okay, how can we help every single child during this time? And the process is repeated for each grade level.
Yep, absolutely.
Really quickly, we do something that's extremely similar to that. Our MTSS, we use triangulated data, and in doing that, we look at our NWEA screener. We also look at our DRA levels, those reading assessments that I mentioned, and then we look at our math assessments from NWEA or school common assessments. And so once we identify it, we use something called a rainbow chart. And so our bottom 30% are students that we give the color red. Those are our intense students. And that carries over from the bottom 30% all the way to your top tier. And so instead of 3 categories, we use 4 categories. And for 30 minutes each day, each grade level, we have a SWAT team. And when I say SWAT, I mean it just like that. I have a team of 6 interventionists as well as all the core teachers for that particular grade level. And so what we do is we put the kids in the categories based on which rainbow chart color they fall in. So blue is our extremely highest group, our red is our lowest group, and there's a yellow, which is what you would call probably bubble, the kids that are right almost there, and then you have your benchmark kids that are right at grade level. I have a tiered system of support where every kid in that particular area is being given instruction based on where their needs are. So our highest performing kids are getting the highest enrichment. They're getting advanced, extremely rigorous activities. Our students that are benchmark are right at grade level. We're pushing them to go a tip over that edge. Our bubble kids that are right below grade level, they're getting support specifically assigned or targeted based on what those deficits are, based on what the assessment said. And our bottom 30%, those kids are being hit by the 6 interventionists. So they're getting specific all the way down to the letter. And that's how the MTSS in my building is run. So down to whether or not, if you're in kindergarten and you can't count your numbers 1 through 50, what number are you struggling with the most? Mm-hmm. They're going to specifically deal with that number with that kid, and all the way up to our highest performing. So we do that 30 minutes a day, every grade level. So we're reaching all of our learners.
All right. Damon Williams.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, my pleasure.
I know a couple minutes ago, off camera, you were looking at a little data. I know that you're a guy who's driven by data. One of the things I found very important when I came over to your school to visit you and see you in action, as you walked me through your building, one of the immediate takeaways for implementation that I noticed was that you have every single teacher's attendance data posted outside of their door in terms of percentage. What does that allow you to do, having that data posted?
It allows me to actually see where we are. So we created 100-day goals. In my school, we created them increments of 100 real days. And in that, one of our goals were to increase attendance daily. So one of our strategies within that 100-day goal was to actually see where we are. So by looking at numbers on a weekly basis, I'm able to walk through, or the teacher's able to walk through, able to remind them, okay, we're only at 90%. Our goal is 95% per week. So now, with that being on the forefront of our mind and knowing that attendance is very important, one of the most important factors in success, because if the kids aren't there, then we can't teach them. So with that being said, the teachers are asked to make phone calls or see where the students are in order to achieve our goal of 95%.
So a couple of things just stood out to me. One is you not only have the data posted, but you actually have a goal that you're shooting for. So with the data posted and the goal in mind, a student can even see, okay, my class is at 90% and our goal is at 95. Now I know your emphasis on data, and I can only imagine how impactful that is for your teachers. How does a student seeing what their classroom data is, how do you think that impacts them? Does it have an impact? Do they just walk past it? What are you gleaning from that?
Absolutely. I believe it's huge, because when you hear the conversations happening with students, and not only that, every Friday we announce the classes with the highest attendance. Okay. So when I do my launch, I do a launch at the end of every day. But on Fridays, we do now it's time for the classes with the highest attendance. Mm-hmm. So you can hear drum roll, please. And where I do it from the front office, I can hear if it's a class right there in third place, Miss Gore's class, and they go crazy. Yeah. So we know that it's making an impact because they see it, and not only do they see it and they're hungry to come to school, they're striving and they're pushing on their classmate to come to school as well, because we want to win.
Outstanding. So we ease our way into this conversation about data by talking about attendance data. What other data points do you reference with your staff members, and how do you reference those data points?
We look at all type of data. We look at formative assessment data. We look at assessment data, summative assessment data. We look at NWA scores. What I was doing a minute ago was looking at preliminary scores. So being in the state of Michigan, after they take the MSTEP, which is our state test, the state of Michigan is able to generate what we call preliminary scores. And in that, we're able to see what students, based on a margin of error anywhere from 4 to 15 being social studies, what kids are proficient and not proficient and partially proficient in all areas of the MSTEP. So we look at that and we use that data actually to guide our groups as far as intervention, which I know we're going to talk about in a moment.
Yep, absolutely. We're getting there, but let's go there. So you mentioned a second ago that ultimately you're going to use this year's M-STEP scores to help facilitate groupings for next school year. So we're already thinking about next school year, and we haven't even closed out this school year, although we're almost close to closing it out. But let's talk about how you use NWEA scores. And I specifically want to think about this in mind. One, how do you use the scores? But two, how do you motivate students to take that examination seriously?
Okay, first of all, we use the scores. We do group students according to the ability for NWA. Now, let me be clear with that. During our intervention time, do you want me to go into the intervention time? During our intervention time, so what we do, we have a push-in model where in grades K through 8, for 30 minutes each day, every day, core instruction stops. And when that core instruction stops, we have a group of interventionists that push into the classroom. Now you have students that are in the bottom quartile, which is in the bottom 25th percentile. You have students that are in the 26th through 49th percentile. You have students who are on grade level, 50th to 75th percentile, and you have students that are already college ready. So during this 30 minutes, what we do is we push in, all core instruction stops for that grade level, and interventionists are using building blocks to build those students in the bottom quartile up, or for students in the third grade, working at an 8th grade level, give them that work. So it's really differentiated instruction all over for 2.5 hours per week, which I think has given us a huge has been of a huge benefit for our scholars.
Now, one of the things you mentioned is that they take the NWEA examination in September. They are then grouped based upon the scores from the NWEA. Then you provide interventions based upon those groupings. But the groupings, the next NWEA exam is not until January, but the groupings may change anywhere between September to January based upon what?
2 words: progress monitoring. It is very, very important to progress monitor. Now, I give my staff this scenario, and I kind of give them this story about how important progress monitoring is. So I go to the gym every week.
Debatable.
4 times a week. All right, go to the gym. and every Saturday is my progress monitoring day. So what I do every Saturday is that I get on that scale. And I have a goal in mind. All right, so if I don't reach my goal, in that time, I go and I reassess what did this week look like. How many times did I do cardio? What did I eat? And if I'm at the level of if I'm reaching my goal, then I can continue the same way. However, if I don't, I have to reevaluate and reassess what I've done for that week. Same way in the classroom. Now, if we're just going until January, we're not able to progress monitor and see where the students are. So groups do change according to what we see when we progress monitor the students to see if they're learning what we're trying to teach them in that time frame.
Right. Outstanding. Tell me a little bit about your day. What time do you arrive? Does that impact the performance of the school? Tell me about what you do every day routinely. Tell me about how you celebrate wins throughout the day. Give me an idea.
All right, so I come to school every day. I get there around 7:15. Doors open for kids at 7:45. At that time, I walk around in the morning. I greet teachers who are already there. Then I go into my classroom. I look at email. So one thing that I've done that's helped me out tremendously over the past few years is that I hard schedule my day. So if you look at my schedule, my Outlook calendar, right now it'll say from 7:15 to 7:45, I have time to look at my email, check emails, and so on and so forth. After that, 7:45, I have greet duty. So I greet every student from 7:45 to 8 o'clock. The doors close at 8 o'clock. During that time, after that, at about 8 to 10 o'clock, I set aside time for classroom observations. So I make sure I go into every classroom every single day. That's about 29 classrooms. And I make sure my face is seen. I speak to the students, and I just observe. It's kind of I get a feel, and I want them to know that I'm there. From there, I go and I see what classrooms I want to observe. So every day I make sure. After that, I hard schedule email time, and I hard schedule time to call parents back. Then I go about my day, and everything is hard scheduled to the T. Now, there's times where I get pulled away, and I have to do an interview, or I have to have a parent meeting, an impromptu parent meeting, what we have sometimes. But I try to stick as much as I can to hard schedule my day. And for me, that has proven to be so productive and the whole impact of the day, because as a principal, as you know, we're pulled in several different directions. But if we have that focus and say, okay, here's what I'm planning on doing. I'm going to get in classroom, so you have to really make what's your priority. My priority is getting in the classrooms and help teachers with instruction. So we do all of those things, and in that time, motivating students, seeing what's going on in the classroom, giving students high five. They know when I come in here and I do like this, the students and the teacher, that's my good stuff mark.
Okay,
so when the teacher see me and I go like that, good stuff.
Yeah.
So they continue to do it. When the students see me do like that, good stuff.
Okay.
So we keep on going.
Outstanding. So you're a pretty regimented guy, and that regimented has translated into success. How do you measure that success?
There's a few ways to measure the success, but I think ultimately, because we are in a state or education is the way it is, we do measure it by test scores. Although I know that may be the thing, like, oh no, but ultimately to keep the doors open and what's published in newspapers are test scores. And I'm proud to say that over the past 4 years, my school we've gotten accolades by the state. When I first got to the school, we were in the 17th percentile. When the state was doing top to bottom, we ended up in the 53rd percentile. Last year, we were a reward school by the state of Michigan. And this year, based on our test scores, we, out of 2,261 public elementary and middle schools, we were ranked number 79th according to the Mackinac Center.
Out of how many?
2,261.
Wow, that's pretty monumental.
Yes.
Okay.
According to Mackinac.
Right.
The Mackinac Center study.
Understood.
Yes.
Well, Damon Williams, I thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Yes.
I'll always leave our conversations that much better and that much more knowledgeable based upon what you've shared. And like I said, I went over to your building. I saw some immediate takeaways that I could take back and implement. And I hope anyone who's watching or listening can see the same and can bring these suggestions to scale wherever they are. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
All right.
Daddy. Is this for a think tank?
Believe it or not, the future of education has a very rich history. And for us here at the think tank, we followed a very simple 7-step process. The first thing is we identify critical areas in the field of education. The next step, we sent out a survey to various educators so that we could get their way in on those critical areas in the field of education. We then narrowed those critical areas down from a lot to a few. We then invited those educators to the table to have an in-depth conversation. We recorded those conversations, compiled all of that information, all of that evidence, all of our artifacts. We screened a lot of these presentations, a lot of these conversations in front of an audience of educators. We got their input, received their feedback, synthesized that information, and now it's up to you to implement the findings. We know that as education gets better, communities get better, the nation gets better, society gets better, and the rest is up to you. Thank you.